It is time once again for the Scramble podcast in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I am Paul Hollingsworth alongside my podcast broadcast partner, Canadian Football Hall of Famer Chris Flynn in beautiful Long Lake, Quebec. And today, Chris, we are joined by Tony Gabriel, two-time Grey Cup champion. I believe he was a four-time CFL All-Star and, like you, a member of the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. Mr. Gabriel, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you.
It's great to be standing still at age 74.
Well, you look like you could still play. Look, this is Chris's wheelhouse. He is a longtime Ottawa CFL football fan going back to the Rough Riders days. He's a big fan of yours. So, Chris, I'll let you start us off here as we welcome Tony Gabriel into our podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, Tony, amazingly, you and I don't think we've ever met in person, but we connected on Facebook a few years ago, and then we've messaged each other quite a few times on Facebook. You've seen some of my pictures I posted when I was a kid. And the first thing I'm going to throw at you here is my buddy Paul Medora gave me this Rough Riders pennant, and it doesn't have the year on it, but I'm going to guess what year it is. I'm going to throw the three quarterbacks at you. Your name's on the bottom middle, but Charlie Weatherby, Jordan Case, and Conrad Holloway.
Jordan Case.
Yeah. And Conrad Holloway. So I'm going to say 79 or 80 when this was signed. I see Pat Stokwa on there and a bunch of guys that you played with. And you're
boy, does that ever bring back some memories.
Yeah, so I have that. Yeah, go ahead.
We had quite a crew that in particular, I had some pretty good quarterbacks.
Yes, you
did. And when you mentioned Jordan Case, who came along towards the latter part of my career, I think there was one more after he and Condridge, and it was J.C. Watts.
Yes.
That came back to us in 1981 when I finished up my 11th year and my career. So I, as a receiver, how much I depended on guys like you, and that made my career.
I just want to mention, so we mentioned Holloway, Jordan Case, Charlie Weatherby, J.C. Watts, of course, 1981. We'll talk about him maybe a little later, your last game, the 81 Grey Cup game. But in 76, incredible, you had Tommy Clements, Conrad Holloway, and a guy that all three of us know pretty good, Bill Robinson, was a quarterback on that team too. So.
Robbie, we had three quarterbacks that could pass the ball on the run, and with Robbie, with Bill, I remember one particular game. A confession from me. I think there was a little vying for who was going to start a particular game in 1975 when I first got traded up to Ottawa. And Bill throws me a pass that in the end zone that went through the uprights. And I lost sort of the vision as it went over the crossbar. And I believe I dropped it. And I'm sure he would have said something very particular to me that day. Well, thanks a lot, Gabber.
he had a gun. He had a gun for an arm, Bill Robinson. He had a very strong arm.
He incredibly put less arc and so much speed on the ball. He was tremendous when he wanted to get it into tight coverage. He could get the ball in there for you.
Absolutely.
So he did very well and made the team there in 75.
For sure. It just, unfortunately for him, he got on the team the same time as a couple of Hall of Famers with Holloway and Clements. So I told him, he said, maybe you should have went to another team after or something like that. But
he was Billy was all Canadian and they were all American. What can I say? You can imagine how we all felt catching the ball for them. They made it made it easy for us.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, don't want to keep you here all night long, Tony, but I want to start off. I'm a Rough Rider fan. We're going to definitely get to the 76 and 81 Grey
Well, that's
Cup.
nice to know.
Yeah, the beginning of your career with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in 1972, playing in the Grey Cup there as a young player. Yeah, just give us a little bit of insight onto your first couple of years, including that 72 season, and who you played quarterback with there as well.
I'm going to say that I was very proud and honored to graduate from Syracuse University in 71 and came back north of the border. I could have gone as a free agent to New York Giants, by the way. I was so happy to come back in front of my hometown friends and family to be able to make the team. And the quarterbacks I had starting in 71, you might remember, were both Wally Gabler and Joe Zuger. And this is kind of funny to tell you quickly, where, in training camp, they roomed me with Gord Christian, who was the incumbent tight end. Number 72 was his number. And, we were competing for the same position, but they, had us roomed together. And anyways, long story short, I started the season, but I didn't quite in mid-season. I was just doing specialty teams, and Gord started. So it was kind of a mixed blessing of a year where I learned really to go for the ball in and amongst the tough competition that we had in the CFL at that time. I'm talking about all the great linebackers and defensive backs. And I survived 71. I'll tell you that much, Chris. And then in 72, we had a rookie quarterback come up from Toledo. His record was 35-0, never lost the game. Chuck Ely was our rookie quarterback. And I'm telling you, you must know this, Chris, to get the chemistry with your receivers out there on the field. Well, in 72, Chuck and I had a tremendous sort of feel and understanding where I'd be, or if he was in trouble, I would be coming back to the ball. And we had a great season. He helped us win out of 14 games, and now the ones that he started, we won 10 in a row to go in
and he was a rookie.
Eastern Final. And back then, Chris, the Eastern Final were 2 games.
Yeah.
In the first game, we were up in Ottawa, and we lose the game 19-7. They come back down to Hamilton, and I'm telling you, we had the greatest pep rally. We had just really buckled down. They housed us separately, in a hotel, trying to get ready for the game. And we came out, and our rookie field goal kicker, it's important. I don't know if you remember Ian Sunter.
Yes.
He was played for the Burlington Braves. He was only 19 years of age, and he kicks 6 field goals for us in that game. So we win in the round in total by several points to go to the Grey Cup that year, which was right in Hamilton, eh?
Yeah.
And do you mind if I tell you a little bit about the Grey Cup game?
Of course, against the great Ronnie Lancaster and Saskatchewan Roughriders, and they were the big favorite.
And George Reed and all. And the game is tied 10-10. And the Chuck Ely has not even looked my way for over 59 minutes in the game. So we're tied 10-10. We get the defense was great. They get us the ball back on about the 15-yard line, eh? About a minute left to go. And then all of a sudden, Chuck Ely calls a flood pattern up the middle. these guys didn't blitz, and he hits me straight up the middle for about 20 some odd yards. Then we huddle up. He calls the same play, but this time it's man-to-man defense I'm up against. So I have to break off the play, and I catch it for about 14 yards, eh? So that's 2 in a row now, Chris. And he calls it would have been like a double button hook off the open side of the field. And he hits me for a third time, and thank God I caught all 3 going to that point, because I get hit in a very sensitive area. And the next play, he calls the same play, but they blitz. Saskatchewan, so I'm in to block on that side. Thankfully, I didn't have to run. And that's the time that Garney Henley, our most outstanding player in the CFL that year, our wide receiver, he played both ways. He catches a pass from Chuck that's like low and behind him around about around the 37-yard line for Saskatchewan. So time's running out. We've got one, I think Chuck runs Dave Buchanan, our back, into the middle. There's only time for one more play. So our rookie kicker, once again, Ian Sunter, is told by Garney. Garney's holding the ball for him and saying, "Kid, just hit it straight, keep your head down." And he puts it right through the middle of the uprights. Last play of the game. What a tremendous, memorable victory to start. And that's my Grey Cup ring from 72.
Wow.
Just to show you, if you can see that.
Yes. Did you
and
guys?
I wear that proudly. They gave us a 50th reunion last fall. 10 or 11 guys come back that were living, including Garney Henley.
Wow.
And Garney Henley turned 87 on December 21st.
Wow.
He lives down in South Dakota someplace.
See, I remember some of those names like Garney Henley from my parents because of my Uncle Kenny. So Garney Henley was playing in the 60s, right? Because he was older than you. So he was playing in the 60s either with or against my Uncle Kenny. So that's why I know some of these names even from before your years even. And Garney Henley, I've heard that name lots of times from my parents. So
and of course, you know why I got traded up to Ottawa in 75 for my last 7 years, eh? I don't know if you heard. Well, I had signed a contract, in 72 Grey Cup that we just spent some time on. I had played out my option for 90% of my first year's salary from 71. Do you know I made $8,400 in 71 and I made less in a Grey Cup year, 90% of the first year, which is about $7,200. And I never cashed a check. Ralph Sazio, our general manager, went crazy. He said, "What are you doing? Those checks won't be any good if you hold them any longer." So I finally cashed them in after the Grey Cup.
Okay.
And then we bargained for a 3-year deal. And that's why I had signed for 72, 73, and 74 with Hamilton. But in 74, they went from 14 to 16 games, Chris.
Yes.
So I stood up as a test case for our Players Association because I said, you should pay us pro rata per the extra 2 games. So for instance, if I was making $14,000, $1,000 a game for 14 games in 1972 or 1973, if you have 16 games in the CFL, well, pay me the $1,000 for the extra 2 games.
Yeah, they wanted to get extra games for the season, but pay you the same amount.
So I went to court as the Players Association test case. And after 6 weeks deliberation, we lost the case in a sense. Why? Because under labor law, you know what they did? From 4 exhibition games, they went down to 2. So the total number of games were 18. You know, we never played much in exhibition games. So the judge in his wisdom said, well, I can't grant you anything, Mr. Gabriel, under the term, 18 games and 18 games total. Then he looked on what was onerous under contract law. And you know what happened? Our contracts in the CFL said ye shall play the 3-letter word, ALL, all conference scheduled games. So, Mr. Gabriel, under those rules, with the CFL changing to 16 games, I can't grant you anything either, because you signed a standard contract with you shall play all. And so you know what happened afterwards, just to finish this? All contracts in the CFL by Jake Gadar and those, the commissioner, et cetera, specified number of games for future guys coming into the CFL. So I feel very happy about that. But
for sure.
Ralph and I got to loggerheads over the contract. I said, look, I'm unhappy, Ralph. You're unhappy. Why don't you trade me? I don't know where I got the gumption to do that. Because you know where he sends you usually if you did that?
Winnipeg
out
or
to
Saskatchewan.
Regina, out to Saskatchewan. And I was surprised in the playoff game in, I think it was in 1974, we were in Ottawa. I think I caught 15 passes for a record or something for a playoff game. And so George Brancato traded for me.
Yeah,
it
usually
really quite
usually
funny.
You usually don't trade your top player to the same division. You usually trade them out of the division, but they send you to Ottawa. Tell us in a couple minutes about that. Your first couple of years with Ottawa, and of course the 76 season, and Holloway and Clemens both came in as rookies, right, in 76 together.
This is very interesting too, because we had Jerry Keeling as the veteran quarterback in training camp, right? In and around 75. But George Brancato made the decision to keep both Condridge and Tommy. And it was a toss-up, from what my recollection is, who would start the game, in 76. Sometimes Condridge, sometimes Tommy Clemens. And so when I look back, they were both capable and excellent quarterbacks. 76, it happened to be Tommy Clemens towards the end of the year.
Okay.
And TC started that 76 Grey Cup game. And it's a credit to him calling the winning catch. And this is kind of funny to tell you all what happened. The play before is the critical one, Chris. If you've ever watched the 76 Cup.
I remember.
I got decked going across the middle with about 20 some odd seconds left, maybe a little bit more. And Lauren Richardson hits me, nice tackle, high across the middle. And Manchuk comes across with his forearm right across my helmet, and I'm bouncing my head off the ground. I swear I saw stars. And I'm trying to put my hands on my knees and trying to get my balance. And Big Jim Cood, our offensive tackle, is saying, hey, Gabber, get back into the huddle. Time's running out. And a play is sent in from Tom Dimitrov from the sidelines. He was our offensive coordinator. I can remember this like it's indelibly written in my mind, but the Gary Kuzik was the other fellow I got traded with from Hamilton. He was our wide receiver. He's the guy who's bringing the play in. Tommy Clemens goes, no. And he calls the fateful play. Rabbi puts me to the right side. fake 34, tight end, put the 3 back through the 4 hole, tight end flag. But the fact is, no one's thinking we're 4 points down that we're not going to run the ball. We got about 20 some odd seconds left. But sure as hell, when Provost went for my fake to the inside post and I went back to the outside, I was wide open. I looked at ball, I said my eyes were 6 feet wide open. And all I could see were dollar signs because the winners got 6,000 each. The losers, 3.
Wow.
Only
So
half.
what was the parade like they must have had a parade down Bank Street after that?
we had one of the best parties. It was just a crazy time. And you know what happened? I had to go out to your side, out to the East Coast. And they asked me to leave the festivities to get on a plane to the Peter Zowski? I think was his first name, the Zowski show.
Okay.
Out in Nova Scotia, in Halifax, right? So they asked me to go to the show, get on the show. So I had to leave everybody, and they're all partying. And do you know they held the plane for me? It was about 20 minutes that it took me to get from the football fields or the stadium up to the airport. And they held the flight for me to get me to go out to the Zowski show. Wow. It was fantastic.
You were like a celebrity.
Crazy time.
Yeah, and Tony, well, before I'm going to give it to Paul here in a second to ask you a couple of questions, but I'm just going to mention in the NFL, the catch was Joe Montana to Dwight Clark, maybe the most iconic play in NFL history. And the most iconic play in CFL history could very well be Tommy Clements to Tony Gabriel. Like at 50 years later, I had friends messaging me this week saying, "Oh, like you're gonna have Tony Gabriel on the show." And nowadays, kids wear NFL jerseys like fans. Back then, they weren't really jerseys; they were T-shirts. But back then, everyone wore Tony Gabriel T-shirts. A lot of us. So in the 70s, the CFL was big. The Grey Cup in the 70s was huge.
Well, Chris, thank you. You're very kind on the commentary, but I always say, thank God I didn't drop it.
Yeah, for sure. Paul?
I would have been the scapegoat of 76, but as it happened, it was just a moment in time. I'll always be honored and tremendously thankful, for my teammates. Looking back, that was superb. And then they came back 40 years later in 2016. I know they were called the Red Blacks then, but with Burris, to win the Grey Cup, and they had us back there in Ottawa after 40 years in July of that year.
Yeah.
And I got to hold the Grey Cup over my head.
Bill, I saw that.
Bill,
I saw that. I have the video too, and I saw. I'll share it with you. But I saw Bill Robinson was there that day too with you, right?
Robbie was there. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
They did a big feature of I think Tommy Clements on the
screen,
the video screen.
Yes.
Yeah. And we had about 21 guys back for that of the group, and what an exhilarating feeling being able to come back on that football field wearing 77 of the Rough Riders. It was a moment in time for me.
And George Brancato, who coached Cape Breton in 1990 against us for 1 year. Yes, he did. University of Cape Breton. But he was there that day too. But sadly, he passed away, I think, a couple of years ago.
Unfortunately, he was 88, and I guess it was just his time shortly. A year or two ago?
Yes. Not long.
now it's probably a couple of years now.
Yeah.
But what a gentleman, and the group that we had, it played into allowing us to show how we best could contribute for the team. And, they sometimes, we'd be making up stuff out there, but they appreciated our efforts.
Do you follow the CFL today closely, and what do you think of the league?
I have Ticats seasons tickets.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're developing right now this year, Paul. I think more parity across the league. It seems like free agents galore, balancing out where needed, and with even Montreal, who is under some stress, being basically nurtured by the CFL itself, waiting to try to get a new owner. They seem to be signing a number of individuals as well. So we're pretty excited. I follow it fairly closely, in particular Ottawa with the Red Blacks and the Ticats. I've always been a homer.
And before we start to wrap up, you mentioned off the very top your years in Syracuse. And as you were talking, I follow Syracuse history a lot in my mind going over the years. Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, who I think graduated in '67. Coach Schwartzwalder was there. Those must have been formative years for you. I mean, that is a who's who that have gone through Syracuse to play for that program, and you're part of that long line of history. That must have been some pretty proud years for you.
You know it. And if you continue it, there was Larry Zonka.
That's right.
Who was there as a senior when I came in as a freshman.
Yeah, because 68 was his Zonka was 68 was his last year, correct? I believe so, yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the freshman, the Frosh, as I would play against the varsity in practice. And I think Floyd Little had just graduated the year before, as I recall.
67 he left, yeah.
And then at the question that people throw at me is for an individual to go to Syracuse as a receiver when they had all sorts of great runners down there, right?
Yeah.
So I was fortunate in the final game of my career at Syracuse to tie a school record of 4 touchdowns in the game against Miami of Florida.
Yeah.
And Paul Palisso was my quarterback. And, we had to change with what we had. And that day, we beat Miami 56-12. That sort of propelled me, as I said at the start of tonight, that do you remember a guy who used to be the general manager of Ticats? His name was Jim Trimble.
Very well. Very well.
By then, he was the head of player personnel of New York Giants.
Okay.
And he happened to come to that game. And I had caught and tied, as I said, the record for 4 TDs. Well, that's why they wanted me to come to New York behind Fran to play with Fran Tarkenton to back up tight end Bobby Tucker, I think was, and O'Neill out wide. But it never happened.
Wow.
Playing with those gentlemen at that time, just fascinating that you can be even mentioned in the same sentence. Before we throw it back to Chris, because Chris probably wants to have some parting thoughts as well. But as you know, Chris Flynn made his name as a football player at St. Mary's University, and his head coach was Larry Utek, who is a big person in this city from his legacy and his memory. Playing against Coach Utek, who was player Utek in those days, what was he like as an opponent?
Larry was one tough son of a a defensive back. He let you know he was there. We had difficulty winning. The Rough Riders had difficulty winning in the Big O. And there was Randy Rhino, Larry Utek, Tony Proudfoot. These guys were tough as nails. And you knew you were going to get hit. Fact is, I may he rest in peace. He was quite a great athlete. Nice to hear, that kind words that you're talking about. And I don't speak very often about defensive backs that way, but Tony Proudford, and he, there were some times head to head that I can remember still. And, he was a fantastic player.
And Chris, how about a final thought by you before we start to wrap things up? I mean, I know this is a big connection to your football background, your football lineage, and those glory years of the CFL. It's nice that we're still talking about the league. It's nice we can celebrate the history of the league. And it's nice to know that the CFL is on unstable footing at times, but it's still a thriving product. And I know, Chris, it's very important to you as well.
Absolutely. And I'll just mention my uncle Ken Lehman played football in the 60s, but I was, born in the 60s. So it was more in the 70s. In 1976, I still remember sitting on my steps in the family room on the stairs with my brothers and my whole family. And when you caught that pass, that was like, it just made my football life and wanting to play football, play for the Ottawa Rough Riders. It started that day big time. And there's a lot of guys that my old teammates and friends felt exactly the same way, that messaged me when they knew you were coming on the show. So it's just a thrill to have you on the show today, Tony. And I say that on behalf of a lot of people out there watching tonight.
Well, Chris, you had quite a career. And if I was helpful or instrumental or something along those lines, like I said, I'm so thankful I caught that pass. You're talking about 76. You had a great career. I believe you're a 3-time Crichton Trophy winner.
Yes.
Look, Tony, we're going to wrap it up. So this has been fascinating. First of all, between the three of us, we count 2 football Hall of Famers. So I'm just along for the ride in this conversation. Tony Gabriel, very good to see you, and thank you for joining us.
This has been fabulous, guys. Thanks,
Tony.
I wish you good night. Have a great year.
That's awesome. So for Chris Flynn and Tony Gabriel, thank you very much for watching the Scramble podcast. We will see you next time.